Get started. Thank you all for coming. Looks like it's the few, the proud today, so I know you have a lot of choices. Thank you for coming here. My name's Harrison Shapley. I'm a program manager on the Access product team, and this is Kevin Nickel. He's a test engineer also on the Access product team. Today we're going to talk about, as you can see, 0 to 60, developing apps for SharePoint with the brand new Access 2013. If you're wondering what the 0 to 60 refers to, that's 0 to 60 seconds. It's how fast you can build an app with the new Access. We've been using this for a while, and it used to be 0 to 60 hours. I think you can agree with previous versions. So great improvement that we've made, a lot faster. I think you're going to be impressed by the things that you see today. So just to go over what we're going to talk about today, we're going to introduce Access 2013 and Access services. We're going to show you how easy it is to build an app in 60 seconds and to customize that app. And we're also going to give an overview of some other topics related to it, like packaging and the architecture, all that kind of things. And if there's only a few things that you remember from today, it's that Access apps are SharePoint apps, and anybody can create these apps, any kind of end user of any skill level, no code is required. And these apps are centrally managed, secure apps. They're going to be very easy for IT to manage. So why are we even here talking about Access? It's been around for 20 years, and I think there's a reason that it's still around. And that's that people and organizations will always have a need to manage structured data. So Excel is very good as a tool for unstructured data, but Access has always been about tabular relational data, and so I think people are always going to have that need. And so it's evolved over the years. Before Access 2013, it was all about these desktop database files. And the database was actually stored in a local file. That could be emailed to coworkers or friends. The user created the UI themselves, and it required access to both modify the app and to view the app. And these apps are still fully supported in Access 2013. But we've also, with Access 2013, introduced these new web apps. And so we think that this is really bringing the whole concept forward into modern day. The data is stored on SQL Server or SQL Azure, and the app runs within SharePoint. It's stored in the cloud at all times. That's the one definition of the app. And you can just share, the way to share the app is you just send a URL to whoever you want to use it to. So it's very easy to share and collaborate. Now, raise your hand if you've encountered one of these problems before in the past. Never, no? Lots of people. Yeah, exactly. So there are a lot of problems with the data management applications that are available today. And these are just some of them. Also, people put their data in all sorts of places. On paper, people have a million thumb drives nowadays. Excel, they don't always use the best method for storing the data that they could be using. And it can really get out of hand, and we're hoping to help solve that. This guy attempted to use a Post-it note system, I think, for managing his data, and it didn't work out very well. Generally out there are we put into two classes the types of data management applications. There's simple ones and structured ones. On the simple side, you get the benefits of it's very easy to start and to evolve on it, but it can often be hard to collaborate with these, difficult to analyze the data since it's completely unstructured. There's multiple versions of the truth. It's hard to keep the data clean. On the other side, the structured ones, they sort of have the opposite problems and benefits. So there's one version of the truth. It's easy to keep it clean. You can really easily do analysis since it's structured, easy to collaborate, but they're often very hard to use, lots of investment, all those kinds of things. So we really believe that Access finds a sweet spot between those where it brings in the benefits of both of those solutions while attempting to avoid the pitfalls of them. So here is a diagram of what you might call the developer continuum. On one end, you have the pro developers on this side, and then over here, we've called them the power user. They've had other names like the buoyed or the solutioneer, IW, and we've attempted with Access 2013 to move all the way to that side of the spectrum for how easy it is to use Access. We wanted to be somewhere over there, and we're getting there. But with this version, we managed to get it down to the IW, and we're proud of that. So the rest of this slide is to show the other development environments that you have. You have Napa somewhere in between, and Visual Studio, of course, is for the pro developer, a great tool. And then these two bars in the middle are to show that Access builds apps for SharePoint, and then the other two can also build apps for SharePoint, and they can also build so-called apps for Office, which are the add-ins for some of the Office applications. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin for our first demo.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to start off and jump in with a demo here. The first demo is going to be building an app in 60 seconds, which, the title of the presentation is what you came to see. So the idea that I'm going to do for the demo, typically use it Access for, managing documents, customer relationships, assets, stuff like that. But to be honest, I've been in Madrid for about a week now. I came a little bit early, spent some vacation time. I have not been thinking about assets, inventory management, stuff like that. What I have been thinking about, restaurants, bars, tapas. So for the demo app that I'm going to build today, I'm going to put something together to track all of the drinks that I've had over the past week in Madrid. And maybe I can make business sense out of this and use it for an expense report or something. So I'll switch over to the demo screen. And we're looking at the Access client now. So this is where you get started to create an application. You can see there's a few options. We can start with a web app, or we can create a desktop database, which is what you would do in versions of Access all the way up to and including 2013. Today, we're talking exclusively about the web apps. So I'm going to go ahead and select Custom Web App. I'm going to give the app a name. We'll call it the consumption log. And then we just need to specify the SharePoint site where we want to create it. I've set up an Office 365 account ahead of time. So there's the URL to my SharePoint site. I click Create, and we're ready to go. So as soon as I click Create, we go out to the SharePoint site that we specified, and we create a blank SharePoint app. We also go out to the SQL Server. Now, because I'm running on Office 365, the SQL Server is running on Windows Azure, so it's in the cloud. So we go out there, and we create a database for you. And then we take your SharePoint app, we take your database, and we hook the two together. And so now that's complete, and I have an app that's ready to use. At the moment, there's nothing in the app. So the first question that I need to address is, what would you like to track? Well, I already said I'm going to build an app to track all the drinks that I've had. So I'll do a search for drinks. And we come back with a selection of what we're calling table templates. Table templates are a collection of table schemas, so all the fields and the relationships between the tables that you can use to track commonly tracked entities. So that as we looked at a bunch of existing solutions, we said, what are people really using Access to track? So we put together about, I think it's on the order of 150 of these that are all on office.com. We'll continue to add more. We'll continue to tweak them based on feedback. But this is really the quickest way to get started with an Access application. So I did a search for drinks, and I'm going to do a consumption log because that's exactly what I want. So as soon as I click that, we read the table definition, and we go out to the SQL Server, and we start creating tables directly on the SQL Server with the fields that we need. And with that click, I've actually built my app. I now have a fully functional web app running on Office 365 that's accessible from anywhere. Let's see what that looks like. So I'll click Launch App. And that's going to launch my default browser, and it's going to browse directly to the app. And here's what we've got. So you can see all the tables that we got. We got some forms with it. I can go ahead and enter some data. So maybe I had a TechEd brew in Madrid. Save that. And again, we're writing directly to the SQL backend. So that's the app in 60 seconds. I've been talking through this whole thing. Obviously, it took a little bit longer than 60 seconds. I've been explaining things. But I think that you can see, if we switch back to the slides here.
Red button.
So I think we can see that it was really simple to get up and running. All you had to do was select the location where you want to create the app. It can be on premises or it can be in Office 365. You choose the tables that you want. I started with table templates to get up and running quickly. You can create your own tables from scratch. You can even import data from other sources. Maybe you have like a legacy desktop database or an Excel or from a SQL Server elsewhere. And then finally, you launch in the browser, and it's ready to use. So what are the components of an Access 2013 web app? Well, first is the new app model. We've strived really hard to get a nice, polished, professional user experience here. Not only that, make it easy to design. Second is SharePoint deployment. Harrison said this once already. I'm going to say it a few more times in the future. SharePoint Access apps are SharePoint apps, one and the same. Finally, the SQL backend. All your data lives on SQL Server natively. Let's talk about each of these points in a little bit more detail. First, the new app model. So Access has been around for some time now. There's a lot of legacy applications around, and it's really easy to get up and started. It always has been. You have a problem that you need to solve, you go into Access, and you start building an app. The problem is not everyone is a good designer. They don't know how to create good UI or a good user experience. And that's not a shot against people that build Access applications. That is a hard problem. There's entire PhD programs out there on the topic. And so you end up with some messy applications. In fact, we came across one, and I don't know if it was like a customer bug report or maybe we found it on a news group or something, and it was an application actually used to track business within a restaurant, but it was ugly. They went into, I think, the color picker. They picked every single color they could find and threw it on. They went into the clip art gallery and threw a bunch of garbage in there, and it was a mess. And, I was looking at this, and I was even going to take a screenshot of it and put it in the slides. And I kind of stopped and thought to myself, well, what if the person that made it showed up today? So I decided not to, but just take my word, it was a mess. I'm sure it was functional for them, but it didn't look good. So that's one of the problems that we're really trying to solve. Don't deal with the navigation and all the UI elements yourself. We can take care of that for you. And in fact, we make it really easy to do. The design experience is really easy. SharePoint deployment. I'm going to say it again. Access apps are SharePoint apps. And you get all the good stuff that entails. Access applications traditionally have a history of just kind of going rogue. We saw the slide of all the places that you keep your data. That holds true with Access applications. You have ActDBs or MDBs sitting on a thumb drive somewhere. You have them in a file share where you don't know where the computer is. You have them as email attachments. They just go out of control, and it's really hard for IT to maintain. Well, as SharePoint apps, you have one central place to see where all the apps are, how they're being used. You can even deploy them to the SharePoint store. The SQL backend. Any professional Access developer that's been working with desktop databases, well, not any, but the vast majority of them start off by using SQL Server. They use the Access client to create a front end, that is the forms and the reports on the SQL data. And that was really the right thing to do. The problem is, not everybody knows what SQL Server is, let alone how to set it up. So the professional developer could do that. The novice, the IWs, the power users didn't have those skills. Well, with Access 2013, everybody is getting a SQL Server database by default. If you're running on Office 365, everything is already hooked up for you, running against Windows Azure. And of course, with SQL, you get all speed and reliability. It's highly scalable. This is important, transparent to end user. If you don't know what SQL is, then that's fine. You can still be super successful with Access. If you do know SQL Server, then it opens up a lot of scenarios for you. So let's switch to the next demo here. And we've seen how to build an app in 60 seconds. I'm going to dive in a little bit to what you get with that app in 60 seconds. So this is the one that we created. And this is also an app in 60 seconds. It's virtually the same. There's no magic here. The only difference is we went ahead and we put a bunch of data in it. Access apps are just much more interesting to look at when you have data in there already. So that is the only difference. So when you come to any Access app, they all have the same basic layout. This whole piece here is called the application framework. And the way that it's laid out is you have a list of all the tables in your application down the left, and then the views across the top. As you select different tables, the views update. So I just selected items, so now we're just going to see the list and the data sheet for items. I select contacts, and I get a different set of views. And you can imagine as this app continues to live and you build on it, Maybe you add some more queries. So I don't know, maybe I have a query for contacts in Europe or contacts in the USA. Each of those could be another item listed in the view selector across the top. So the idea is you come to an Access app, and the first question you ask yourself is, what data do I want to view? That is, which table should I look at? So you go with items. Next question you ask yourself is, how do I want to view that data? So you select an item in the view selector. We're going to stick with the items list here. The next thing you decide is, what is the subset of data that I'm interested in? So I have a list of all the drinks in my app. Maybe I just want to see the martinis. So I'm going to use the filter control and try that one more time. There you go. So I'm going to use the filter control, and I typed in martini, and I matched on 2 drinks that have martini in the name. Now, the important thing about this filter control, it's built in with every single view that you create. I didn't do anything special to put this in here. There's no code behind this. I mean, you saw me create the app in 60 seconds. It was just given to me. So now that I've narrowed down the data set to just what I'm interested in, I can start working with individual records. I can edit the existing record, or in this case, maybe I want to add a new record. I'll add a mojito. They seem to be pretty popular around here. We'll call it a Madrid mojito. I can give it a rating, maybe a 3. And I specify the type of the drink. Now notice the type says find. This is an autocomplete control. It functions very similar to what we just looked at here with the combo box. That is, it will display a list of records in one of the related tables. But the difference between the combo box and the autocomplete is one is a browse experience and one is a search experience. Combo box is great when you have a limited set of records. Here we have 5 or 6 items. But once you have hundreds of records, maybe you're looking up to another table that has hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of records, combo box isn't usable. It gets huge. You have to scroll up and down to find the individual item. So that's why we created autocomplete. Solves the same scenario, looks up records in a related table, but instead of a browsing experience, it's a searching experience. So as I start typing, I type CO, and it comes back with all the matches that have CO. So mojito is a cocktail, but maybe I want to make this a little bit more specific. So I'll add a new item here, and we'll say it's a rum cocktail. Save that. And the type updates with what I enter, and I'll save that record. Now again, when I use that autocomplete control, I didn't do any fancy code behind that. That was given to me automatically because there was a lookup defined. There's nothing more to it than that. And did you notice when I switched, when I saved, we go from an edit mode. So now I've got all the fields outlined here so you know exactly what data needs to be entered. We switch into a view mode, which is a little bit more readable. Well, when I'm in view mode, the type shows up as a hyperlink. So of course I can click through that, drill in, and get more details on the type. So that's when I have a relationship. So it's a one-to-many relationship. We're in items, looking up to type, which is a category. So we looked at the one side of the relationship. Well, on the many side, we create a related items control. So we have another table called consumption log, and consumption log looks up to the items table. So with the related items control, I can see all the items related to the currently selected item in my view. Now, of course, mojito is a brand new record, so there are no related items. But again, easy enough to click Add Consumption Log. So I had a mojito. Maybe I had one today. Maybe I was a bit nervous, so I had 4 today. And I had them at TechEd. Save that. And the related item control updates to show the related records. And just like everywhere else we've seen, in many places through the app, all you got to do, click on it, you get a pop-up to show all the details. Again, no code involved. So that's kind of an overview of some of the new controls that you get for free in Access applications. I'm going to quickly show you the view types that are available to you. What we've been working with so far is called the list details view. Simply called that because you have a list of items down the left, details on the right. Another useful view type is the data sheet, just a grid of all the items in your record set. lets you do ad hoc sorting, filtering. I think it's really useful for bulk data entry. I can do a bulk copy and paste, or if you want to paste in from Excel, or if you're just typing a bunch of records and you do tab, it's good for that too. And the final view type is called the summary view. So the summary view takes all the records in a specified table or a query and groups it based on the field of your choosing. So here we have a summary view created on the contacts table and grouped by the group field. So, excuse me, similar to the list details view, you have a list of items down the left, only this time it's an aggregate. So the business, there's 2 records in the business group, 1 record in the family, 2 records in friends. I notice as I click through, the right side updates with exactly what those records are. So it says here that Harrison and I are friends, so that's nice. And I'll click through here, and I get all the details of Kevin Nickel. Again, the pop-up scenario through many places in the app. So that's kind of a high level of what's available. And again, I'll reiterate, there is no code involved. This is an important point for us. We did a lot of work looking through existing Access applications. And as we looked through the VBA code running behind them, we found that the majority of code that people were writing was just to handle navigation. And a lot of it is pretty simple stuff, launching pop-ups, navigating views. But once you start throwing in, where conditions and filters, well, the chance you're going to make a typo, is very, very likely, and you're going to get it wrong. You do this over and over again. It's just not a good use of your time, especially if you're doing this in every single app that you're creating. And not only that, you're doing it in every app that you're creating. I'm doing it in every app that I'm creating. We're both trying to solve the same problem, but we're doing it in different ways, and it's not a good use of our time. So I'll switch back to the slides. So that was our app runtime. Quick review. So the application framework, you select your table, choose your view, filter your records, and start working with the data. And the controls that we looked at, there's autocomplete in the data sheet, pop-ups all over, get those for free. Different view types like the summary view, related items control, again, created automatically when you have a lookup, and the action bar used to work with your data. So that was kind of how you use the application. Let's kind of pull back curtains a little bit and see how you create an application. And Harrison's going to take care of that.
All right, thanks. So first, I'm going to actually show you a different version of the app that we've been showing you so far that we spent a lot of time with before the conference, and we basically added a bunch of features to make it a lot nicer, a lot more user-friendly. So here, when you come in, there's sort of a welcome page when you start, and what we wanted to do was make it easy to find the drink and then to say that you drank that in order to add it to the consumption log. So basically, first I would select the type of drink, say a beer, and then I see all the beers, and then I say, oh, it was a cream stout here, and then I can say I drank this. And there's some custom logic here to pipe that through to this pop-up to say that you just clicked cream stout, and then all I need to fill in is the rest of the fields, which is I drank it today. I drank it at, oh, wrong one. TechEd, and I only had one of those. I was not nervous. And so there, I've already added a new entry to the consumption log, and if I look at that as it is, there's the entry that I just added there. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to open up the design experience, and I'm going to show you a couple things that you can do in the design time. I'm not going to show you everything because we don't have time. There's lots of stuff that you can do. But basically, the previous version had a nice feature of contacts, they called it. And in the process of updating it, I had gotten rid of that. I didn't think that I needed it. But now I realize that the reason it was there is so that you could actually record your drinking buddies, the people that you drank with on a certain occasion. So I want to add that functionality back into the app. So here I have it open already. And first, I'm just going to add that new table. So you're back to the experience you saw before, the same add new table experience from when you start. In this case, Oops. I'm tracking my drinking buddies, so those are people. There's a whole bunch of options for what you meant by people, different variations on that. And I'm not sure if Kevin pointed out before, but the icons indicate whether it's just one table by itself or whether it's multiple tables with the relationships and everything. So these are all single tables. If there's a little multi-table icon, that means that you're going to get multiple. I don't think there's any here that are like that. So in this case, I'm fine with just the regular people table, just whatever standard fields it's going to be. But I do want to remember what kind of people they are, so I'm going to rename that to drinking buddies. And so now that I have this new table, I need to create the lookup to that table in order to create the relationship between them. So it's going to be in the consumption log table, and I just double-click on that, and here's the table editor view. So this is where you actually can change the fields and the types of fields for that table. And so I'm just going to add a new field to the consumption log. We already have quantity, date, all that, but now we're also going to record the drinking buddy that you were with. So it defaults to short text, but I want a lookup. And you have two options here. The second option would be if you sort of like our rating field where it was just 1 through 5, you can predefine the things that are going to be in there, or you can actually look up to another table. So here we're looking up to another table, which is people. And I believe that there's a field that I can display, yes, display name. That'll make it a little bit nicer to look at, first name, last name, as you would expect. You can also define the delete behavior, whether you want to just prevent delete of the records in the related table or delete the corresponding ones. So I'm going to leave it as the default, which is prevent delete for corresponding records. So save that. It's going to go up to the server, update the schema. And then, since I added that relationship, that lookup field in the consumption log app, and I did not edit the default form that was generated when I added the people table, it automatically added this related items control at the bottom because it knows that you have a relationship now, and so that you're probably going to want a related item. However, on the consumption log view that we have here, the list view, we edited it to make it just a little bit easier to use, nicer looking. And so since it was already edited, it's not going to assume that it should add a new field, a new control, once you add a new field. So it's very easy to do that. I see the new field on the right here, all the available fields, and here's the new one, drinking buddy. So I'm just going to double-click that, and it figures out the appropriate type of control for what you clicked on. So in this case, it's going to be an autocomplete because it's a lookup. But if it was like notes was a long text field, so it's a little bit bigger. Images is a different kind of control. So it's going to figure that out automatically. Date is going to be a text box with a date control, all that kind of stuff. So let me line this up just so it looks nice. And as you can see, it's just drag and drop with all these controls. Very easy for anyone to figure out. And so now I've added the drinking buddy functionality, so let's go try it out. First, I would need someone to be in there, so Kevin's a buddy of mine. So let's save him so I have someone to look up. And then if I were to add a new entry to the consumption log, let's see if there's a mojito, because we actually drank that together. There's the one from New Orleans. And I don't actually know who that producer is, but I'm not sure if it's required. Drank that today. And I personally had 3 of those. And so now I can finally look up and say that I drank it with Kevin with that autocomplete. So I'll save that, and we're all set. So that was just a couple of things that you can do in the design experience, but there's a lot that I didn't cover today. Macros, queries, new views, all sorts of good stuff. If you want to hear more about that, we have another session tomorrow that's called A Deeper Dive. That's at noon, right across the hall in N106. So if you want to hear a little bit more about that, please check it out tomorrow. So to recap that real quick, you can always open any Access app that you have straight from the browser by clicking the gear icon in the upper right and clicking Customize and Access. That'll open up the rich desktop client and put your app into the design time. If your app is starting to get a little more complicated and or maybe it has some queries and macros that are saved and you need to access those, you can always show the navigation pane. This is similar to previous versions of Access, and that way you can just easily see everything that's already been defined in your app. We didn't use that here, but we'll show that tomorrow. And so these are the things that would show up in the navigation pane: your tables, your queries, your views, otherwise known as forms, and your named macros. So these are macros that are sort of you've saved and they're standalone. And to recap the table creation experience that we've showed you a couple times, you just can always click the Add New Table button on the left, right under where the tables would be, or you can also click Table from the ribbon at the top. And you have a few different options. You can create them from table templates, which is what we've done so far by typing into the search box. You can create a blank table from scratch if you just want to define all the fields yourself. And then you can also get the tables from a data source that you already have. You can see the options that we have here: desktop databases, Excel spreadsheets, SharePoint lists you can link to. If the common experience that we have for adding new objects into your app, you just click Advanced, and then you'll see the options there. And of course, these are the different options. The only one I don't think I've mentioned is blank view. You can always just create a blank view where you drag in the control. You set the data source and you drag in the controls. That's a good way to achieve some of the otherwise unattainable scenarios. And now I'll turn it back over to Kevin to talk a little bit about the architecture.
Thank you, Harrison. So everything that we looked at so far has been entirely from the client side. We looked at using an app, and we looked at designing an app. There's a few other components to an Access app, which we'll look at. So there's the web browser. That was the first thing that I talked about, the runtime. A big difference here, which we mentioned, previous versions of Access, you needed Access installed on your computer, even if you just wanted to consume an Access app. You could get the free Access runtime distributable, and that would help, but the point is you had to install something. Now your runtime is entirely the web browser. And we test on all of the major browsers, so this will work on IE, it will work on Firefox, Safari, Chrome, all that will work. The Access client still exists, but as Harrison just showed you, it's the designer. You only need Access installed on your computer if you plan on creating or modifying existing Access applications. The runtime does still exist. So everything that you've been able to do in Access in the past, you can still do today. Yeah.
But there's no desktop runtime for the web apps.
Right.
If you create a web app, it's just the browser.
So on the server side, we have SharePoint. And everything that we've been doing today has been on Office 365. So you have SharePoint on Office 365. On top of SharePoint is running Access services. Now I've modeled our application as HTML and JavaScript in this Access services box. Well, all the views that we've created, and let me pause here. I'm going to say forms and I'm going to say views. Forms and views are the exact same thing. We used to call them forms, and now we call them views. So I apologize if there's been any confusion on that point. So all the views that we create in Access, HTML and JavaScript. You make your modifications in the designer, you position and select your controls, you save it, and we spit out the HTML. If you want to create macros, we have UI macros, and you can create those really easily in the macro designer. I think that's part of what Harrison is going to show tomorrow. When you save those, they just become JavaScript. And of course, the most important part of an Access application is the data. All your data lives in a SQL database. And because we're on Office 365, that database lives on the cloud on Windows Azure. So the workflow is you use the client to create an app, modify your forms, spits out HTML and JavaScript. Your users, the people that consume the app, browse to your Access services site, that HTML is served up, and they can start working with the app. Now, as you're in the designer and you're creating and modifying tables, we're sending messages to Access Services, which then talks to the SQL database to make your schema modifications. Similarly, if you're in the web browser making data edits and adding new records, talking to Access Services, and Access Services talks to the SQL database. Now, everything that I've shown has been on Office 365. You can have an on-premises deployment of Access Services as well, in which case your architecture is very, very similar. We just remove Office 365, so SharePoint is now running on premises, and you have a local SQL Server 2012 that you stand up. So let's talk about the SQL database a little bit. For me, the SQL database is one of the most exciting parts about Access. Everything that you do in Access, it's all real SQL. You can connect directly to that SQL backend and do whatever you like with it. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. So, first thing that you need to do is you open your app in the designer, and you launch the click file to open the backstage. And notice you can see all the server information for my app. So here's a SharePoint site, here's a database. So now we know where the data lives. The next thing you need to do is open up connections to that database. I've already done that ahead of time. So I opened up the connections, and I said, I want to allow read-write connections to my database. Click View Read-Write Information, and now I have the server, database, username, password. Everything that I need to connect to the SQL database. Well, ahead of time, I went into SQL Server Management Studio. I connected to the database. So here's the same server, here's the same database, and here's all the tables in our application. If you name a table items in the Access application, you end up with the table access.items on SQL Server. It's named exactly the same. I've put together a simple select query, filtered it down to one record, so you can actually query the backend directly. So if I were to switch back over to my consumption log here and find that record, and maybe I edit it and change it from delicious to please remember to fill out your feedback forms and save that. If I switch back over to SQL Server Management Studio, I'll ignore that, try it again, and hopefully, fingers crossed, there we go. So now my query succeeds, and you can see that the notes field was updated with exactly what I entered. So the whole point of this, real SQL behind the scenes, there's no magic happening, no obfuscation. Anything you can do with SQL, you can do with the Access backend. So this opens up some pretty interesting scenarios. Just grab the clicker. So yeah, unobscured table names, open and revealed in the backstage. This opens up some interesting scenarios. Anything that can connect to a SQL database can connect to Access data. If you like using Crystal reports, connect that to your Access data. If you want to write a custom .NET application, connect that to your Access data. If you like building reports in Excel, connect that to your Access data. And I'll show you very quickly what that looks like.
We're not going to show you how to set it up, but if you want those directions, there's a link in the presentation to a blog article that gives all the steps on how to hook it up.
Yeah, there's not really much to it. It's just not very demoable. So here I've already connected my Excel spreadsheet to my Access backend, and I can create pivot charts on it. So if I select the drink date and the quantity, so now we're looking right at my SQL backend, and here's all the drinks that I had over the past few months. So super easy to do. This is great for the reporting scenario in Access databases. And yeah, it just opens up a whole world of scenarios for you.
Looks like we had a bad day back in May sometime.
So quick recap, open the connections, and connect from anywhere. Yes?
You actually have to publish the app to create the database.
The app, as soon as I clicked create at the beginning, the app is published. Your app is live right away.
And the database.
And the database as well, yeah.
What keeps me from creating a dummy database, creating a SQL database, and then use that database for a regular database?
So the question is, what keeps me from creating a dummy database and using that as a regular database? Nothing. I think on your Office 365 account, we might limit you to 12 applications, so you're not going to be able to create a million databases to do with as you please. But yeah, I mean, use Access as a simple table designer if you want. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a size limit too.
So that's SQL. Let's talk about SharePoint, and Harrison's your man for that.
Yeah, so hopefully there's not too much confusion about these two different things, but there are apps for SharePoint and there are apps for Office. So just to remind you all what the difference is, apps for SharePoint are fully functioning apps that run on the web within SharePoint. They're hosted within the cloud, and once again, Access apps are SharePoint apps. Apps for Office, on the other hand, are sort of add-ins of functionality that currently are supported in Word, Excel, and Outlook. And those are like, in the task pane or things you can drag in. And they can connect to web services, that kind of thing. And there's stores for each of them. So I'm going to quickly show you the SharePoint store, just to give you an idea, and show you that Access apps are indeed SharePoint apps. And so let's go to one of these. I'm going to go back to the SharePoint site.
Let's click yes.
And I'm going to go to the site contents, add an app, same way as you would add any other app. Here you're going to see the ones that have been added by your company already. But if there's one that's not here, you can always go to the SharePoint store, which is here on the left. And you'll see all the apps that have been developed by third parties. But if I do a search here for Access, you can see a bunch of Access apps that have already been built, mostly by the folks on our team. The ones that have this sort of brick red color are the Access ones. There's mixed in some ones that aren't built with Access. But as an example, a guy on our team, Bob Piper, he built this app for a client, McKinstry, who's a construction company, and they had a need to track all of their different tools. And so he created this app for them. They can see what's been checked in, what's checked out, what site it's on, who checked it out when, keep a log of all that data. They can even do bulk check-in and bulk check-out using a barcode scanner. Pretty cool. And so he was able to just save this up as an app package and put that app package in the SharePoint store. And now anyone can add this app to their SharePoint site as well. And then they can click that gear, customize and access. Maybe they have a slightly different need or they want slightly different fields or something like that. What's great about Access is you can actually edit those apps, which is one thing that's, I think, a little bit of a benefit over the other SharePoint apps, that you can actually continue to customize it to your needs once you've downloaded it. So I think we have a slide in here about, so that's what you just saw. And I said he was able to save it as an app package and upload it. Super easy. You just go into the File menu, Save As, and you can save it as a .app file. And you can then use that .app file to publish it to the store or to put it on a different SharePoint site or just to create a copy of the app that then you want to use as a starting point and customize it from there. Those are all options that you have. And you also have the option when you do create this package to include the data or not. So if, for instance, you have been using it for a while with your data and then you want to put it in the store, you might not want to include the data at that point since you're just giving the template. But you might also want to put some sample data in there, in which case you would include the data when uploading it to the store. And, well, I guess the slide comes later, but there's a slide showing some of the examples of apps that we've created with Access, some of which were in the store, so we'll get there in a second. Of course, if you want to migrate your data from other places, we support a bunch of them. Of course, earlier versions of Access, you can bring in your desktop database files. But what's important to remember is that it's just going to bring in the data and the relationships, so the tables and the relationships, and then the navigation and the UI is all auto-generated. So you're going to lose the UI that was created for those desktop database applications, but you are going to keep the data and it's going to have the new web app UI. So, of course, Excel spreadsheets, SQL Server, and then SharePoint lists. You can link to SharePoint lists read-only, not read-write. Then to reiterate once again the difference between the desktop databases and the new web apps, they had a lot of rich functionality. VBA, if you still have your VBA that you want to keep, go ahead. There's a whole ecosystem around that, and they're fully supported. The web apps, on the other hand, very easy to share with other people to collaborate. You just give them the URL. You don't need to code anything. You can use macros, of course, which is sort of like coding, if you want to add a little bit of custom business logic on there, but that's also very easy to do. And then it uses, brand new SQL Server, SharePoint 2013, all the latest technology, and all the new functionality that you saw today. So if you're wondering about Access Services 2010, the way that was architected was the tables were all stored in SharePoint lists. That was a new functionality in Access 2010, and those apps still run in Access 2013. And as I explained before, you can, of course, migrate the data and the relationships into an Access 2013 web app that would then move it instead from SharePoint lists to having a SQL backend. So here's the list that I was talking about. These are some examples of what people on our team have been able to build so far with Access, just as a few examples. A couple of the very large apps that we made, we were able to manage the entire reorganization of the Microsoft Office division, all the employees using an Access app. Very cool. There was also, I worked on the legal counsel tracking app a bit, and so they were able, the LCA group had a need to track all of the different attorneys that they use for outside counsel, and they wanted to both have the information for all those people as well as sort of a rating system between them, and then lots of things. There was a FIFA tracking app that had over 900 users. It was sort of like a fantasy soccer league type thing. And so some of these you can see in the store. I think the training tracking app is in the store. And another member of our team, Jeff Conrad, he just finished his new book, Access Inside Out 2013, so this is a shameless plug for it. Please check it out. It's actually, correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's finally coming out in the next few weeks, I believe, and we even have a copy of the first chapter here to give away.
If anyone wants one of these, please come up afterwards, or I can hand some out now.
And so that's a great resource to tell you everything you could ever possibly want to know about Access 2013. He knows more than probably anyone in the world. It's a great book. Of course, you've probably seen this before, but there's lots of other things you can check out at TechEd. We've been at the Microsoft Solutions Experience, and we're going to be there a little bit more. If you have specific questions or you want to check out all the things that are new in Office, SharePoint, and all the other Microsoft products. We also have the other session that I mentioned tomorrow. Here's the specific information, SCSP 327, and that's a deeper dive. There's going to be a lot of similar content to what you saw today, but it's going to go a little bit deeper into the design time experience, showing how to do some more things like macros. And so that's tomorrow at noon. I'll be giving that talk in N106. Please fill out an evaluation. We would really appreciate it. I'm sure by now you've probably done a couple other ones, but this is only my second time doing one, so it would help me a lot. And thank you all for coming. And we've got plenty of time for questions now, so please ask your pressing questions. Yes?
The QR code.
Oh, yes. That would be helpful.
Yes, in front.
Yes, so that's actually, I was going to mention that. To repeat the question, he was asking about sort of permissions of users who can access that app. Great question. We sort of forgot to mention that. That's one of the things that we're getting from SharePoint. So by being a SharePoint app, we get all of the SharePoint permissions. And so I think that's defined on a site basis. And so in any SharePoint site, you can define who has read control, read write, or full control. and that's going to be piped through into the apps. And so any apps on that site are going to inherit those permissions. You could, if you only wanted to share with one person, you could create a subsite and just put that one app on it and give them that access. Only people with full control are going to be able to actually modify the app itself, like the schema and that kind of thing. Thanks for the question. Any more? Yes?
If you write a web app for the store,
Uh-huh.
SharePoint store, and I want to protect it, because otherwise I can download one, edit one, and put it up in the store again for a new price. So if I create a web app, is it possible to protect it?
So to repeat the question, he's saying that is it possible to protect an app or an app package? Because if you upload it to the store, then someone who downloads it could always just open it in Access, customize it, and put it back in the store. That's true. We're adding a locked functionality so that you just set a little property saying that the app is locked, and then the users won't be able to modify it. It also helps with the upgrade story, because if you publish a new version of your app, then we'll be able to actually upgrade it if they haven't changed it.
Yes.
Which store?
So all the data in your Access app lives exclusively in the SQL Server. So you can't currently in Access you can't grab from other sources. You can have read-only links to SharePoint lists. You can't write back to them, but you can display the data from SharePoint lists in the Access application.
How about scalability on the SQL Server side?
So the question is, how about scalability on the SQL side? It's just SQL Server. I mean, anything that SQL can handle, if it's on premises, whatever you have, whatever hardware you have running on SQL Azure. Again, we're running on Azure, so very, very scalable.
Size-wise, the old versions are restricted to 2 gigs.
Correct.
My impression was that your SQL Azure database was sized out to 1 gig.
Right.
Correct?
That is correct.
So the question was, in desktop databases, we had I think it was 2.5 gigabit limit to the file size. What is the limit on SQL Azure? And around 1 gigabyte is the answer. Yes?
That's the new access support all data endpoint. Can you access that from all data?
Can you access with Access? Can you access the data from ODAT? If you create a legacy Access application, you can do that. You can't do it in the new web applications, right? So you could even create a desktop Access database linked to the data to the SQL Server created by our 2013 web database, for example.
OData.
Oh, OData.
OData.
So that one I don't know.
I mean, you could probably set up like a custom application maybe that goes straight to the SQL, but there's no direct OData for like read-write to other sources. Any more questions? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, there are typically, at least to my experience, two transitions when such applications occur. First, you create a desktop application, then others are interested, so you want to convert it into a SharePoint application. So, first question is that step possible at all, or do I need to start off with a SharePoint application? And the next transition would be when things become too complex, you would want to hand it over to a developer who would probably want to take that over into Visual Studio and even go for maybe server-side code. So is this transition possible?
Do you want to do this or me?
So to take the second one first, we have no way to do that currently. So we would love for it to be a RAD tool that you can just open up straight into Visual Studio or something like that, but we don't currently support that. They pretty much live on their own, these apps. For the first question, I'm now blanking on it.
So the first question was, can you start from a desktop database and kind of graduate to the web app? That's not, well, I was going to say it's not a scenario that we designed for, but yes, you can. So you can create a desktop database, then create, when you want to grow up to the server, you can create the web app and import all the data into your web app. We'll auto-generate the forms similar to what we showed today, but we're not going to import the forms. We're not going to import VBA code and such.
As another option, you said it's sort of just to show to your clients. What you could do is create the web app first and then create a desktop database that links to that SQL, and then you could show them that one first. And then if they like it and they want the web app, it would be the same exact data, and you could just switch right over. So that's another option. Mm-hmm. Anything else? We've got plenty of time.
One last question.
Yes.
Is it possible in the previous version you could create a hybrid
Yep.
version? Is that still possible?
No. So you're talking about you would have a database that would have both your linked SharePoint lists, plus you'd have the local data. No, in 2013, everything is always online. Yeah. I mean, the answer is no.
No, what data?
Yeah.
Maybe if there's a possibility.
Yeah. That's a good question. Thank you. Any more questions? Still have some cards to give out.
Yeah.
If anyone has a really good question, we got a couple of these too. Oh, there we go. Branding? So the look and feel of your application is inherited from the theme that you have applied to your SharePoint site. So if you've applied your branding to the parent SharePoint site, the Access application is going to have the same look and feel. And I think Harrison's quickly going to show you
I'm attempting to demo it. It takes a little while. But so here are the themes that your SharePoint app has. Let's say that your company has a very green look to it. You can set this for the site. And you can also set like the icon and things like that for your SharePoint site. And we made sure that can be that would be kept when you go. That look would be kept when you go into.
That's a beautiful choice.
Thank you. Yes. So now the same app is inheriting that and keep using that theme. So that's some of the branding you can use. You can do custom background images, colors, logo, all that stuff. Thank you for the question. Are there any more?
Great. Oh.
Is the database
Yeah.
on SQL, is that the same database for all of your apps? Or is it
So is the database on SQL the same as the database for all of your apps? And the answer is no. It's one database per app.
Mm-hmm. And they're separate from the content DB, too.
And you get the last one.
Yes?
Is there a way to do more complex field level validation?
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you do more complex field level validation?
Let's get on here.
Yeah, you can. So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, please.
So a lot of what you're describing can be done with table level validation rules, which is, I think, what Harrison just opened up here. If you want to have the asterisks for required fields, that's not built in, but you can do that with a UI macro, for example. I think go ahead.
Like, you could always define the label text here, define the label text in the form, just do that, or you could, I guess, do a UI macro.
Yeah, you can do data level validation or view level validation. And we have data macros as well. So you could add like a on insert or after update event. Again, using the macro designer, those get turned into SQL triggers on the back end. If you're interested, that's part of what Harrison's going to be talking about tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
For every installed instance of the app, does it create its own database?
Yes.
Correct. So every installed instance of the app does create its own database.
So if you're seeing it processing when you install or add a new one, that's actually going on provisioning a new database and everything in the back end. All right.
Well, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.